So I'll give you guys a little background about John. John started a business as a teenager with a lawnmower and enough determination as a dozen men. John Hoich built a career that made him a millionaire by the time he was 30. Was that just 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Nice, man. John gives God as Savior and Lord Jesus Christ, thanks God every day for his divine success and everything he's accomplished. His businesses have ranged from grounds maintenance contracts to U.S. government facilities up to land development and ownership of hotels, office buildings, industrial buildings, apartment complexes, shopping centers, assisted living facilities, a 9-hole golf course, a 50-year contract for military housing development, and numerous strategic business investments. John is a public speaker. You said you spoke at how many places this week? And compelling, he has an amazing story in Rags to Riches. His book, From the Ground Up, he details an entrepreneurial career. His thoughts on business are generous, and tells us his lessons that he learned and gives us a formula for his success. So without any further ado, let's give John a big round of applause.
Thank you. I don't have to pull the mic down.
Oh, no, yeah. Oh, and if you guys, we're recording this for our podcast, so if you guys have questions, just go up to the microphones in the center, and then we'll call for you. Okay?
Should I go up there now and ask the question?
Yeah, I went up there every time.
We're supposed to stand back there. How you doing, everybody? Yeah. It's good to be here. I been out there before, so to look at guys like me that are talking, but it's an honor to be here, and not sure. I've been thinking since he's asked me to speak what to talk about with this group. So some of it will be personal, some of it will be business. So if I bore you, just raise your hand. All right, I gotta go. So I'm John Hoich, and my story begins as a child of an alcoholic father. Has anybody had any alcoholic situations in their life? And so I had an alcoholic father who was beat my mom, beat us kids, raised in a family in West Omaha, born in Council Bluffs. Anybody in Council Bluffs? Came over on the Mayflower to Omaha, and lived at 33rd and Madison for a year, and then we moved out to 90th and Center by Westridge Drive, Paddock Road area. And unfortunately, was in a situation of a family that my father was an alcoholic, and my mother came here from Crookston, Minnesota, and Patterson, New Jersey, via the Council Bluffs to Omaha. And so that was the beginning, and the beginning became very treacherous as at 10 years old. From 5 to 11 years old approximately, the father that I had was very violent, World War II vet, and PTSD, or however they said it, never seemed to take it out on his family. And we lived in an 800 square foot house with 8 people in it, which is hard to believe today when we all bitch about living in 1,200 square foot with a 2-bedroom. It was pretty interesting with living in those kind of, but that was a normal house back in the 60s. I'm old. So it was, that was the beginning. And at 10 years old, from after him beating me and beating my sisters, my mom, they got divorced, and he lost everything he owned. He had a bar, 28th and Q, and lost everything we had. We were on welfare, food stamps, and ADC, but I was living in District 66, so going to Westside High School, where a lot of, I don't know how many people went to Westside, but it was everybody there had, last name was someone very well known and respected, and my father was a drunk and had a bar that was bankrupt. So it was very tough because everybody was successful, and that was the good news and the bad news. The intimidation was tough, the insecurities was tough, and my dad told me I was a no good rotten little bastard and never amount to nothing from all the beatings he'd do. So the self-esteem was low. So you kind of start out with no money down. It's kind of like the real estate, and no beginning, no hope, and everything was negative. So I had 2 decisions to try to help my mom when they got divorced. So I started carrying paper out. Anybody had a paper out when they started? And that was my beginning. So I had 2 beginnings. My kindergarten teacher, who I love and never forget, who taught me yes and no and please and thank you, and just common sense things that we use the rest of our life to our last breath. So that and my paper route kind of taught me the beginning of business. You know, you deliver a product, you collect your money, and you pay your, supplier and hope to make a profit. And so the World Herald was of great knowledge of the beginning of my business career. And then the second thing, I started doing some restaurants, working at restaurants, car washes, gas stations, House of Pies at 90th and Center. I know nobody's old enough to remember House of Pies, but it was 57 varieties of pies. It was a great place at 90th and Center. And then I worked at Shakey's Pizza and a lot of great restaurants. And then at 16 years old, after being in 5 foster families at that time, my mom having nervous breakdowns. One day when I was a junior at Westside High School, I came home, I was getting ready to go to school, talking to my mom who had 5 nervous breakdowns. We were in 5 different foster families, several months at a time, from all the beatings from my dad to her. And she was talking to me and her heart just gave out and she died in front of me. So I'm 16 years old. My dad was he had filed bankruptcy. He was dying of cirrhosis of the liver. My mother's dead. I'm the oldest of 4 kids and a little brother, 5 kids, 4 sisters and a brother, and no money and no parents, and we're put in our 6th foster family. So that's kind of the beginning of my first 16 years of life. It was quite a bit of tragedy, and the biggest thing is just feel like there was no hope, and there was no, how do I get out of this? What's next? What could go worse? And so the beautiful part was that I was put in a foster family in Burke High School District, and nothing against Burke, if anybody went to Burke, but I wanted to stay at Westside where all my friends were, and District 66 wouldn't allow anybody to go to school there unless you lived in the district, and no longer did I. And I was working at a car wash, and I was really, really scared that they weren't going to let me stay at the high school. And they had a big board directors meeting, and they broke their rules. So, like Arnold Schwarzenegger always says, rules were made to be broken. So I'm glad they broke that rule, and they allowed me to stay at Westside. And then at my mom's funeral, I remember thanking her for all she did, and I told her that I'd raise my brother and my 4 sisters, and that I'd be a millionaire at age 30. It was kind of a commitment that I could come back and help kids that were like me, the underdog. Has anybody ever felt like they were the underdog? It's if you ever had it, you know what I'm talking about. And a lot of you are not, been in situations to where you felt like there was no chance of getting out of your situation or what your situation was like, whether it was a marriage or business or life or family. We've all had some kind of obstacle. And then we have to either give up or find a strategy, and that's exactly what I did. And I've kind of known throughout my life is that never give up, never. And so that was the attitude I took, and the only thing I inherited from this great family was, on the front of my book, a Sears Craftsman lawnmower. So that was my tool. I hated mowing the lawn, I had hay fever, and I hated grease. So I'm like, now what? So I was at a foster family in the Burke District, knocked on the door to the lady, and some of you'll know or remember this lady. Her name was Arlene Geschwinder, and she owned a school that her and her husband Leonard started called Randall's School of Real Estate. Anybody heard of that? So I knocked on her door and I said, I live next door and I have a lawnmower. Would you let me mow your yard? And she was my first yard I cut. And she told me about real estate and about it, and said, get in my car. We drove down to 114th and Center, and she said, this is my building where I have real estate classes. You're going to mow this. You're going to mow my house. But you're going to bill my business for both. Do you understand? So I learned the gray area to the IRS that day. And so that was the beginning of my mowing career. And then I would start one thing I did is I asked a lot of questions and never stopped asking questions. I was a sponge. So I kept asking her about real estate and asked her how you make money doing it and how does it work. And I never did, I even went to her school later and got my degree in real estate and got my license, but I never did anything with it. I just tried to get a job at World Group. Trent Magavity wouldn't let me in. But anyway, I started mowing her yard. The next guy I mowed was right behind. His name was Bruce Steinfeld. And I mowed his yard. He's next day, and he says, get in my car, and he takes me to his business. And it was called The Drover, the restaurant. And he goes, now you're going to build my house, you're going to mow my house, mow my business, and you're going to build my office. So the first 2 customers were crooked. So I learned how to write off everything, my underwear, everything. So I just sometimes you got to do those things, right? It's just business. So that was the beginning of the business, and then I start mowing more yards and graduated from Westside High School and went to UNO and took business and real estate and entrepreneurial classes and drug and alcohol and mental illness classes, trying to figure out why my dad was the way he was. Finished after 2 years at college. My lawn business start growing like crazy, and I got my associate in business and real estate and also in the drug and alcohol, and I got an offer to work for Valley of Hope in Norton, Kansas to be a drug counselor, but my lawn business was making about 40 grand that year, and I'm like, man, this is big money, and they only offered me 20. So I just sit there and which way do I go? And so I decided to put up with the grease and the hay fever and start mowing lawns. So that's how it all started. And start mowing condominium projects. P.J. Morgan gave me a lot of apartments when I was young. And then I joined a great club at 19 years old, the youngest in history, maybe in the world, called Rotary. Has anybody heard the Rotary Club? Every one of you should join Rotary. It's the greatest service club in the world. We have 1.4 million members in the world. And that was the best thing that I ever did. So I joined Rotary, and first month there was 200 members. It's service above self, so it wasn't about getting business, but it was about building relationships and giving of your time and giving of your money. But you build relationships, what happens? You get business. So after about a year in the club, there was 200 members in the club. Without lying, exaggerating, I did at least 50 of their homes and businesses. And every one of their homes got billed to their business. That continued on through my career. And so that was a big part of my life. I really grew my business from service clubs and from meeting there, and then referrals, and the business just grew, and it never stopped. And I got introduced to 1982, which none of you are probably born by then, but interest rates went to 22%. So I had a loan of a nursery that I bought at 12%, and it went up to 22 in about 3 months. So you guys are used to 3% interest. You can imagine what it took to pay a monthly rent or monthly interest rate at that. And so I got a rude understanding about fluctuating interest rate loan that I signed that I didn't realize it was fluctuating. So when you're getting a loan on real estate, be sure that you understand the difference between fluctuating and fixed. And so that was a lot of learning lessons. Every time I turned around, I found another obstacle and then had to find another strategy. And when I was 18 years old, I was mowing for PJ, and I met his father, Paul Morgan, and I'd graduated from high school, going into college, and bought a house from him on a land contract. Has anybody heard of a land contract? That was the only way that anybody that didn't have any money back then could buy real estate. So I bought a house at 2301 South 23rd Street, 23rd and B Street in South Omaha, and put $1,500 down from mowing lawns, $6,500 for the house, and land contract at 8% interest. It was a pretty good deal at the time. And I joined the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity at UNO. And I made a deal with my fraternity brothers. If they helped me paint it and fix it up, they could party in it on weekends. So that worked out good. Sometimes. So we kind of tore it up but they kept repainting it. So 2 years later, it's like 20 years old, 21, just turning 20. And I sold it for $13,000, so I doubled my money, and all the labor was free, and got a lot of the carpets from apartment complexes that I mowed, and they tore out their old carpet, so I recarpeted the whole house for free with old shag carpeting back then. That was still good-looking stuff. And I met a home builder named Ray Kopecky Homes. I don't know if anybody remembers them. And he sold me 2 lots for $9,000. I had enough money, and I built the best investment I ever made as a young person that I encourage everybody to do. I built a duplex, and I lived in one half at 20 years old, rented out the other side, and within 5 years, the other side paid for my side. That was good math. And I got a 15-year loan fixed, not fluctuating, with fully amortized, and so at the end of 15 years, it was paid off. And so I ran part of my lawn maintenance down in the garage, and I maximized that property. And it was it was in Walnut Grove at 144th and Q, and he built it interesting, so it was 2 single attached dwellings. So it had 2 abstracts, 2 titles, so I could sell the other side or rent the other side. I ended up living there till I was 35 years old, paid it off, and at 35 I had a duplex paid off, and then during that time I had bought a lot of other properties, but it was the best investment, so I encourage anybody young that buy a duplex and live in half and rent out the other side. I've been telling my sons to do that, and I have twin boys 24 years old that I'll talk about in a minute, but that was the best thing I did. And then at 35, I found a property on 180th and Q, between Q and F, that I bought, and I rented my side out, so now I have cash flow. So that was the really most important part, of building your success, and is having money is one thing, and net worth is usually the score, what everybody says, well, my net worth is this or that. But what I learned, number one thing I learned through my whole life for sure, is net worth means nothing, and cash flow means everything. So you can have a lot of net worth, but if you don't have cash flow, then it can obviously change everything in the picture of whatever you're doing. So during my 20s, I bought a 3-plex, a 5-plex, a 12-plex, 18-plex. At 28, I bought a 66-plex, and it just kept growing. And so all my lawn service money, every time I got some more money, I'd buy another property, and so I didn't. And I had some mutual funds. I put money away at 18 every month, $25 a month, and then 50 and 100. And it grew as I grew. So I did the 2 things I focused was lawn business and real estate and mutual funds. So those are the 3 things I focused. Warren Buffett says, stay in what you know. And every time I tried to get into another deal that had nothing to do with those 3, I lost my ass. So remember to stay in what you know, stay in your space. And then about 28 years old, I bought a farm, which was land, so that was real estate, at 186 in Harrison, and for $1,800 an acre. And I'll be damned, they built a high school called Millard West about 18 blocks away. So that over time turned out to be a $12 million profit later on, so that was a good one. And then I start learning about 1031 exchanges, and then I went into a partnership with a friend of mine named Jerry Slusky, and met a young man named Trenton Magid. Trenton helped me get into an area I didn't know, and I lost my ass sometimes, but called strip malls. so, so I built my first strip mall with Trenton, and he leased it. It's called Southwestern Plaza next to Mercedes on 144th, across from Charlie's on the Lake. So that was my first experience of getting into commercial. And we built it. Trenton leased it up. He was very, very creative. It did well. And his marketing was a bottle of Tabasco, and he custom labeled it, Trenton Magid, World Group, his phone number all over it. And then it said Southwestern Plaza, for Southwestern, for the hot sauce. And it was a good marketing idea. It helped lease it up, right? So, but then that was good because that was cash flow. And so that was a good one. And then ended up doing 15 shopping centers. Some did good and some did bad. And is there a heckler in here? And so, but it's true. And so I learned, but I also kept buying more apartments and got involved in some 55 and older. Steve Fowler from Landmark Homes sold me one in Ralston that I still own today. Last month I paid off the mortgage, 36 unit senior living. That's really nice when you have a deed to that. It's one nice thing to have a deed to your home, but when you have an apartment complex for it paid off, it's really kind of groovy, right? Anybody heard of groovy? So then I bought another property at 108th and Harrison with partners, right catty corner from Rotella Bakery, called Oakbrook Park Apartments, 162 units. And been in that since 1995, and I bought all the partners out over time, and in 6 years from now it'll be paid off, and I've been offered $22 million. So that's a good one. So it's there's the good stories and the bad. I've had some shopping centers that I lost millions on, and but the greatest one that I got involved with, Trenton managed about everything I've owned. I still owe him. How much do I owe you? A lot. But 144th and Maple, we bought from Cormac, the Greyhawk shopping center with Lowe's, Michael's, Red Robin, and so that was the biggest one I did. And then built another building to the east of it, and bought it and sold it to a REIT called Inland in Oak Brook, Illinois. And so that was when I really realized when you're selling to a REIT, it was really interesting, a big learning experience, and I made a lot of profit. And so I kept, always reinvesting into real estate. Real estate's been very good to me in Omaha and Bellevue. We own several thousand units. We got into Brittontown, Raintree, Pacific West Apartments, 144th and Pacific. Bought a lot of complexes and got married at, my dad actually, I forgot to tell you, he died when I was a teenager, right at 20-ish, and so he died of cirrhosis of the liver. He was 260 pounds and died at 70 pounds with the alcoholism. So one of the things I decided to do is, and he smoked 3 packs a day and drank 27 screwdrivers a day. Died at 57, 2 marriages ruined, 9 kids ruined, and so I decided never smoke anything, which I was good, and I hardly drank because that was good too. And so I just focused work, and all the beatings and all the hell that I went through, it was interesting that when people ask me, how did I get through it? All the obstacles and all the beatings and all the stress, and some people use alcohol for stress. Some people do pot. Some people do stronger drugs. Some people gamble, porno, all different kinds of, sins or addictions, I guess you could call it. And my addiction is, there's probably some of you in this room that have it, and I know Trenton has it, and it was a deal junkie, is doing deals and workaholism. And so workaholism became my ability to, the harder I worked, the less I would have to think about all the childhood nightmares that I went through. The good news is that the hard work and the workaholism, paid off. But it also, as you get a little bit older, you realize that doesn't find happiness. And so that's when I, really spent more time, finally found a gal, got married at 35, lost my brother at 31 to a bad heart, and then met Denise when I was 35, married her at 38, and had the blessings of twin boys, 212 and 31. They were preemies, and now they're 5'10", and thank God they look like their mother. So they're Jeremy and Justin, and so they 24 years old now. And that was obviously a big highlight in my life and a big thing. And so all through my life, I kept thinking one day they'll take over my lawn business. The lawn business grew and got Offutt Air Force Base. You probably heard of Offutt. And we've been mowing it 35 years, 2,200 acres a week overall. And then we went nationwide to 9 states, mowing 25,000 acres a week. So that company really grew, and I continued to buy more real estate and stocks. And so it's been a great ride. Again, a lot of stress, a lot of ups and downs. 2008 to 12, I never thought I'd get through, if anybody remembers the recession. And having tenants, lawyers called me every single day saying, my clients can't afford to pay their rent. You got to lower their rent or they're going to move out. And I'd lower their rent and they'd move out anyway. So those were hard times. And anybody that went through the recession and came out of it, I give you a hand, because it was tough times. So it's never always going to be easy. But the rainy day, having money for a rainy day is having cash flow and not focusing your net worth. That's one of the biggest things I want to probably preach the rest of my life, is obviously never give up, but also focus on, when you get into something. And when I was the deal junkie, which I'm not anymore, I'm completely in detox. And that detox is that I don't get into any deal anymore if I don't know the exit strategy to get out of the deal. Has anybody gotten that situation where you got in a deal and now you say, how the hell am I going to get out of this one? And so I'm very careful and selective on what I get involved in. And so recently I did an out-state investment, and I bought an assisted living in Cape Coral, Florida. And so that's been a new investment. But I knew the exit strategy. I rented it to a person that does skilled nursing and memory care, and so they're the owners of the business. Remember, stay in what you know. I'm the landlord. So I get a nice check and paid it off, and I get a check every month. So those are the kind of things I'm looking for. Right now, looking at a deal in Tampa, Florida, more apartments, so that way I can convince myself to go down there in the winter and live. So it's about time, right, to be a snowbird. So I've taken, my own advice lately, and that is, to buy things that cash flow, know your exit strategy, don't get over leveraged, get into things that you understand. I'd rather own. I say this to so many people that don't listen to me, unfortunately, but I'd rather own 50% or 100% of a deal than 5% of 20 deals. Control your journey, control your destiny. You'll never, ever regret it. And every time I got into a deal where I was a minor stockholder or a piece of the pie, as they call it, or hey, and I had a partner, I won't say his name, but he seemed to, any kind of deal he could get 18%, 8% of the ownership, whatever it was, he didn't care. He had 120 deals, but those people control them, and so then if they decide no distributions, what good is it, right? Remember, the one thing we want is cash flow and full ownership. And so you want to be able to get into investments that you can get cash flow distributions and not be told no. I hate being told no. So another deal I got into was in 2005. I was mowing the general's lawn at Offutt Air Force Base, and that was really exciting. He said, "Are you bidding on on the housing contract. I said, what housing contract? He said, well, all the houses that the soldiers live in the world, Guam, over in Germany, United States, Hawaii, Alaska, they're all going to be sold to developers. And I said, really? How do you bid it? He goes, well, just go on gov.com. So I kind of understood that, bidding all these military bases. So I looked into it more, found out you had to have 250 million to get in. So I was like, that's a little bit of a problem. And you had to have a good experience of grounds maintenance and then have a history of apartments of 2,000 or more, and so I did. So I was in a club called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and a gal in there named Lisa Roskins was in there, and her dad was Mike Yanni. I don't know if anybody's heard of Mike Yanni. He's 88-year-old real estate finance banker, and so I went and talked to him, and I said, hey, let's bid on this together. And I told him the whole story. It's a 50-year contract, and then you knock all the houses down, build new, and rent them to them for 50 years, and remodel some of them, the historical homes where General's Row and Chiefs Row was. And he said, so as him and his daughter met, his daughter came back and said, it's too big for us. It's something we can't handle, and I'm like, I can't give up. I got to find somebody else. And so I went and talked to a few other people, even Trenton, but he said no too. But I went and about 30 days later, Lisa calls me, and she said, my dad wants to talk to you. So I go back into him, and he said, Albert Einstein once said, if it's not an absurd idea, it's not worth pursuing, so let's go for it. So that was thanks to Albert Einstein. We bid it. There was 8 bidders, and we were the only one of 2 of the local area. We were bidding against big corporations, Hunt and all these huge real estate companies, builders, developers, and we won the contract. So that was exciting. So it was a 50-year contract for them to do the management, me to do the maintenance, and together we rented it and made money. And so we're in year 17. There's 33 more years left. So thanks for your tax-paying dollars. And so that's been a really good real estate deal. It's 1,954 homes. So it's with that, and there's been great depreciation from it. So I've been able to have a lot of depreciation, so I don't have to 1031 deals. I can just sell them and absorb the income tax. So that's nice too. And so there's, and then recently, my son's graduated from college, and is anybody, and I thought, well, for sure they're going to take over my lawn business. I mean, the farmer, great granddad has the son and the son and the son who keeps farming, right? And so I thought, I grew them up, I taught them well, and so they should be in real estate and mow lawns, and they both told me they didn't want my job. I said, well, what is my job? And they said, well, you're a workaholic, and we don't want that. So that's when I really came to a realization. That was about 3 years ago when that conversation happened, and then I really found out they meant it. So they didn't want it, and it was the best thing that ever happened, because by a miracle, January 1 of 2020, I met a young man that was a lawyer for the Winnebago Ho-Chunk tribe and really understood the government contracting with the Ho-Chunk tribe, and a wonderful young man. And he said, took me to lunch and said, I want to buy your military mowing business. I go, well, we're in several states. I mean, this is a lot of money. This is millions of dollars. And he says, I know. And he kept bugging me for about 3 months, and in 2019, and January 1 of 2020, I sold it to him. So that was a big deal in my life. We had about $10 million in equipment. He bought the buildings, the equipment, and then 6 months later, he started hounding me. He said, I want to buy your corporate lawn care business. I go, what am I going to do? I mean, you're going to let me work for you at least for a year? And he goes, no, I don't need you. So that was, I became unemployed. So I started focusing my real estate more, and a friend of mine's dad died, and was kind of perfect timing. And he was the largest farmer of the state of Iowa. He made a decision to not give his kids any of the money, left it all to charity, called the Charles E. Lakin Foundation. I don't know if anybody's heard of it in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And so for the last 5 years now, I've been on the board and managing the whole foundation, and I love what I do instead of hate what I do. I hated mowing lawns, but it did me right? And so now I'm managing the Charles E. Lakin Foundation assets on the board. Started my own foundation, and it's been just a nice change in life to where I learned, to never give up. I learned that net worth means nothing, cash flow means everything. I learned that God needs to be first, whatever religion you are. Your family's second, and the other stuff all comes third. Because if you don't have those priorities, you don't have nothing. And as you get a little older, you get a little bit smarter and wiser, and I'm sure you've all experienced some of that as you keep going and finding that things don't mean anything. And so my sons have taught me a lot. One is a rock climber. And how are you going to make money rock climbing? I guess recently rock climbing's become a Olympic event, and so I think he's gonna pursue that. He's also managing the rock climbing wall at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, so he has a job, and he's getting his master's degree now after business, real estate, and entrepreneurship that they both did. He's going on for a sustainability degree, which I never heard of, and so it's environmental science, so he wants to make everything green in the world. And I didn't really mind that until the other one is a glass blower, blowing glass, making beautiful jewelry and other things I don't approve of. Trenton's his biggest customer. So that's been a big change in my life from, two sons that I thought would be mowing lawns and plowing snow and landscaping and doing real estate or doing what they want to do. So that's, I guess, the entrepreneurial thing that I implanted them, because I ended up doing what I wanted to do, and thank God I didn't open a bar like my dad, right? So the experience, the thing I've learning from them is, that I hate to say it, because now I used to say this, or I remember adults used to saying, "You kids these days," and now, but these kids these days don't care about how fancy your house is or what kind of car you drive or what kind of name brand clothes that you wear. They're living in the moment and experiences. Anybody agree with that? And how stupid I was, because I thought all that other stuff was more important as I was, throughout my life. And now I'm watching them, I'm learning, and I'm praying. Thank God for everything. I have no debt for the first time in my life. And anybody that knew me knew that I went through the ups and downs like everybody. Failure's not fatal. Failure's getting down and staying down. And if you fail at something, get up and get going again. Never give up. And I praise God every day for my life, and I praise God that I failed, because those made me stronger and better, and it feels good when you reaccomplish, yourself and whatever it is. But the greatest success is really seeing in my sons living in the moment, learning to really truly live in the moment, and really seeing them enjoy their experiences. And that I was able to give them the ability to do that, because I didn't have that choice. So they got to be a little thankful that they had someone support their glass blowing equipment and the building and the inventory. And I haven't got paid back. He says, "Well, thanks for the investment, Dad. I don't know if there'll ever be a return, and I don't want any of the products." So it's been a journey. But now I'm focusing on maintaining my assets. I've actually I'm building some apartments in Norfolk, 150 units. I'm not dead. I'm still doing some deals out at Southport, 120th and Giles. I developed that ground, or Securities America, PayPal is. I just sold my last shopping center out there, 15 of them, so I'm out of the shopping center business for right now. So If you got any for sale, Trenton. No, I don't want. I'm learning another word too called no. I've been able to say no, and I used to never say no. How do I get into it? And how do I get Rochelle Ageisti to give me the loan? Is Rochelle here? She was here. She made me a lot of loans, a lot of bankers. I used to borrow 80% from this bank. I learned it from somebody we both know, and borrowed 80% from this bank back in the 90s and early 2000. You borrow 20% from this bank, you get it praised, and you get check back. I went like, man, this is great. Let's just keep doing it until 2008 came. Then you had to give the check back, and you still owed the 20%, and the property was only worth 80%. So that's one of those things that you don't want to get yourself over leveraged. Say that. Never get over leveraged. So cash flow is the king. Net worth means nothing. And your real friends and family are the most important. And I've been able to take the greatest parts of my life. Those were the things I bought. The beautiful things that God's been able to give me to do is in Rotary and at Westside High School at 30, I went back there and I asked if I could help an underdog like me. So this year was my 33rd scholarship I've given to a boy or girl at Westside High School. So that was exciting. They have to write a 300-word essay why they had a life of adversity and what they did to not give up but overcome it. And that's been a blessing. And to see them, and then the Hoich Alumni House at 90th and Pacific that they honored me with is inside there were all the kids' names and what they become. And after my death, it's going to be perpetually going on. I'm leaving enough money so it'll go on hopefully forever. And that bar at 28th and Q that my dad owned that ruined 2 marriages and 9 kids, we tore down and built the John L. Hoich Center for Recovery. So what was the name of the bar was First and Last Chance. And now it has 32 rooms for women and 32 for men, drug, alcohol, mental illness, helping them with a second chance. So those were some of the blessings that I've been able to bless back. And so it's, never stop giving, never stop helping others. I like to help people with a hand up, not a hand out. And that's been a big thing that I enjoy doing. So with that in mind, I thank you for having me talk. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to help you. And anything I can do to do that. But just remember, just follow your heart, your own intuition. When you're looking at a deal from a piece of ground, from a house that needs to be flipped, from a property, from any kind of property it is, my biggest advice is to get in it, know how you're going to get out of it. Because it's so easy when times are good that bankers will say, oh, just sign here. But then one day you got to pay it back. And that part, it took me years to learn that. It's just, I'm sure, a lot of you that have a lot of property know what I'm talking about, and those that are just getting into it, just beware to not get into something that you can't get out of. There's always another deal. So never be greedy. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. All right. We'll take any questions.
I gotta tell you what, that was better than what I remembered 5-6 years ago. So thank you very much. I was always told by my mentor, always have 2 to 3 exit plans in everything you do, right? And so I appreciate that advice. But my question for you is, you kind of talked about some failures you had, and you mentioned that mainly your failures were in the shopping centers. Can you dig a little bit into that and give us some advice on the mistakes that you made and how you came out of that?
The words I just said about I was definitely over leveraged, and I listened to a lot of guys older than me, smarter than me, and I did it with them, and so I have no debt now. Just and that one complex that pays off in 6 years is the last thing I owe on, and cash flow is unbelievable. It's a miracle. But back then, we're by these shopping centers, and some of them we put 80% or 20% down or 25% down, and they're triple net lease. And you do a projection of building it, and then all of a sudden, shit happens. You know, they don't rent. So then your projections go to hell, because you're all of a sudden, you know, you're projected that you're going to rent up this fast, and that you're going to be able to pay, you know, the taxes, the insurance by the tenants, and if you don't have them rented, you're the landlord and paying the triple net and the mortgage. And so those killed us, and it killed me and some that I did without my partners. And so I thought I really understood it, and it was a space that's one of its own. It's one of its kind. It's like Office, only it could be as bad in Office. I only had 2 Office deals in my career, and but in some of the strip malls, I made a lot of money, as I shared. I mean, they weren't all bad, but the mom and pop businesses were hard, because you know, it could be anybody in here that wants to have a startup. They want a beauty shop or a boutique store. You know, we even had a dentist that went broke. He did all the build out, got them all in there, and he never opened up. And I loaned him the money to do the build out. So I mean, like, how did that happen? A dentist. And one day we had a national tenant during 08 to 12, and I thought, well, that tenant's never going to go broke. And I had them in 2 of my shopping centers, and they had 2,000, you know, businesses. And so I thought, that tenant's not going to go broke. Thank God I got a national tenant. It's called LA Weight Loss Clinic. Get a phone call from a lawyer from New York. Oh, yes, sir. Next Friday, all 2,000 stores are closing. Just like that. And now I've got, you know, all this LA Weight Loss Clinic booths. And that's the other problem with strip malls, is then you have to gut them completely a lot of times and restart from the beginning of a different user and a different type of business. And so that gets expensive. And then you give them allowance to do their build out to go back in. So you got to, you know, it's like a complete tear apart and put it back together again. And it was tough. And especially I had a shopping center where MP Dodge was in one of the spaces. They had 144 mini booths or whatever, their little, you know, what are you going to do with it? You know, and you had to get rid of the whole thing, and they left it there. Oh, we're going to leave it with you, thanks. You know, because nobody was using that anymore. So then you got just the cost to take it apart and put it back together, and then pay those very kind leasing agents a commission to release it. And, you know, then you do a 5-year lease, and you pay the real estate agent the lease up front. And the only one, honestly, that stood behind my nightmare that I'll explain next was that you do the build out, you spend $250,000 with them, you know, all the leasing commission, 5-year lease, and you're thinking, well, that's over with. I don't have to worry about that one for 5 years. 2.5 years into the deal, they go bankrupt. Now what? You haven't even paid for the leasing commission and the build out, let alone the mortgage, let alone make a profit. And Trent was one of the only agents that released the space at no charge. So let's give him a hand. But there's a lot of truth to that. You know, when it comes to, she asked about talking about trust, and when it comes to when times are good, sometimes it's easy to, everybody's trusting everybody. And then when times are bad, then the real honest people show up. And the other ones that are the hogs versus the pigs. And I don't mean to be offending, but it's an old saying that I love. Pigs get fat, but when you're a hog, you get slaughtered. It's okay to be, you know, make money, but don't take it all. Leave some for the next guy. Be fair. Do unto others as you want them to do unto you. We all learned that in kindergarten.
First off, I want to say thank you for coming in and speaking to all of us tonight. Now, my question for you is, my granddad used to always tell me, with age comes wisdom, and I feel like you have a lot of wisdom to impart. So, throughout everything that you've done, I know that you've had to deal with negotiations, working with people to solve a problem that's profitable to you and them. So can you give us some advice on how you approach those negotiations and how you're able to decide when is appropriate to walk away from the negotiations?
It's a negotiating question. I was taught in all the seminars. I wanted to finish one thing about the strip malls, just 1 second. What I did learn about retail and what I learned about multifamily, which how many people are in here mainly for some kind of home or multifamily investment? So majority of you, and how many are in strip malls? One of you. So stay away from strip malls. One thing I learned about strip malls is that when it comes to trust, when it comes to negotiations, and when it comes to, when it comes to what I learned from several hundred tenants that I was a partner in or owned, that when it came to their retail space, they ran for the hill. They're like, Robert E. Lee's group, and let's get out of here. We're going to lose our home if we don't walk now. We're going to lose our home, our car, and our kids maybe. And so they didn't care. Their heart really, I found that they didn't care. They weren't honest. They'd lied through their teeth. Their lawyers lied. Their bankers even lied to save their. And so the experience that I learned was trust in God, and all others pay cash. It's hard to trust anybody when the ceiling's coming down. And there was a few that stood honorable. And so just be careful of people. Sometimes it's the people you trust the most end up failing you. So that's why I really trust God, and then you got to be really careful on who you're trusting. What I found about the apartments was different. During the recession in 08 to 12, I had nobody not pay their rent because they had to put their head on a pillow at night. So they'd do whatever they had to do to make money to pay that rent, to not lose their apartment or home. And so that's when I said, I want to focus more multifamily and houses than strip malls. Because of that reason alone, I will live that way the rest of my life. I mean, I'm thinking about building another shopping center right now and apartments above it. It's kind of the new thing, right? But I'm going to be very careful on the tenants that I put in there. I'll wait longer instead of getting the first one that the leasing agent brings and says, oh, I got one. I went, yeah, let's sign them up. I didn't really study them. So one of the wisdoms is really learning who your customer is and really understanding that they have good credit, just like a banker does a credit check, so should landlords really do a strong credit check to know the personality and their history. And that's one of the things I didn't do when I was younger. I was just so lucky to fill up the space, which was stupid. And so I learned a lot from that. And so the biggest experience with the wisdom getting old, are you saying I'm old? Okay. So, it does. I mean, Charles Durham of the HDR, I mowed his lawn when I was 20. And he sat me down and he said, say this after me. So I'm going to make you all say it. Money buys experience. Experience winds up with the money. Isn't that true? You pay for those mistakes or whatever it was, and you figured out what you did right and what you did wrong, and then you make a profit. So remember when you do something wrong, remember it. And when you do something right, remember it. Tiger Woods hits that ball, and that experience, now he knows right where to put that ball. And so it's the same thing in business and in life. Money buys experience. Experience winds up with the money. And that's what finally happened to this little lawnmower guy.
Awesome. Just wanted to talk about probably a difficult topic for multiple people, but you were talking about workaholic. I think the term you used was dealaholic. And how would you balance, or what would you say to some young people coming up about not overworking, but also working really hard? Is it every day? I guess just how do you balance working super hard on your goals if there's just some networking tips, or just, I guess, mainly just your outlook on hustling and working hard, and if it's just more networking and not every single day? But I would love to hear your thoughts on that topic.
Without crying, it's a good question. Because when my dad told me I was a no good, rotten little bastard, never amount to nothing, from 5 to 11, I constantly wanted to prove him wrong. And so I spent my entire, and again, I worked harder to quit remembering those hurts. And so I was an exception of the rule, probably because I wanted to forget, and I didn't know how to forgive at the time. And so then I kept working day and night. I never worked a Sunday unless it snowed. And when you're in the snow removal business, you work on Sunday. And I did snow removal for 42 years of my life. So I was, even when I wasn't out in the truck, my mind was. But I tried to go to church on Sundays and tried to spend time with my family on Sundays. I ended up getting divorced, unfortunately, after 11 years, but never missed one thing for my kids. Not one of their soccer games or scouts or, violin stuff at school. Never missed one thing, no matter what. I was there for my boys. Should have been there more during the marriage, but there was two sides to every story. But at the time, I did make that a priority. So no matter what the business deal was, they were first during that time. But other than that, I'd leave at 7 and come home at 11 at night, and I wasn't from bars. I was at the office doing billing or working on contracts and whatever it took to just keep building the business. And I'd go, work on equipment. I'd do whatever it did to make the show go on. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't work hard, but it shouldn't be your God. God should be your God, family should be your family, and work should be in its place. And hard work never hurt nobody, but priorities and having a balance is probably the weakest thing that I had growing up, and now I have it. I will not work any Sundays, and I'm never going to plow snow again. And I'm very careful on what I take on. If it has to fit my plan instead of me fitting that plan. So I think that everybody, the advice I would give is that, it's just like having a budget and spending your money or paying your credit card off so you don't pay interest, right? You should have a budget with your time, your business, your job, your career, your life, and anyone that can put their priorities straight is smarter than anybody in the room, because that's going to be the best balanced life. And when you get my age, and one guy in here really knows how old I am. I see my dentist here. Hi, Father. Dr. Rich, stand up, Doctor. Yeah. 40, how many years? 44? 43 years he's been my dentist. Give him a hand. And he's a deal junkie, a workaholic. He's a dentist his whole life, a professional photographer, and a real estate broker. So he knows what I'm talking about. He's worked his whole life but raised a beautiful family. His wife works with him. She's wonderful. So he had a balance because he put the family in the whole team that worked out good. But and I don't have any more cavities, do I? So balance is the biggest word I could give you. Have balance, and it's so important. And the biggest thing that I also learned and this is the hardest thing to say in this room because I've been thinking about it more than anything else in life lately, is I always would say, when I get to this point. Has anybody ever said that? And when I get to this point, and when this is paid, and when I get this paid off, and when I get this bought, I'm going to be happy. Has anybody done that in their life? And have you ever got there and there was just wasn't enough, there had to be one more thing, and then you would say it again, and when this, and it never stops, because there's never enough if you put that first. And so now I have no debt, I have great cash flow, but my expenditures never changed. So they're still down here, my cash flow's way up here, and I'm like, what do I do with the money? So what I regret is I wished I'd had more balance during that whole journey when I was younger, that I would have not, I never realized it. So you have more money than you need, and let that be your big, one could say, well, sucks that you got that problem. Well, it's not the point. The point is you don't need as much as you think you do. And so you should then put in your budget really what you need to be happy, and then spend more time like my twin boys and have experiences. Go travel or go climb rocks or blow glass. Does that make sense? Enjoy your life.
Hi. That was a really nice story, by the way, and nice jokes as well. So at one point in time, you kind of glossed over the fact that your business grew. At any point in time, did you experience any plateau where you just was like this in your business? It just wasn't always this way, or well, this way.
It was always this way.
So
I never had this, and most of the time it's like the stock market, kind of goes like this, and that's what my life was like. I mean, there was a couple periods that went like this, but then it came back up because I never gave up. But I don't remember any time in my life where it just went smooth. There was always some kind of day or week or month or year that it.
But it was always growing. It
always growing.
it was never stagnant at any point in time.
I never plateaued. I was too ambitious. I was one of the things that I did do, and I wrote in my book. So if anybody wants to buy one, the money will go to the John Lee Hoich Center for Recovery, Stevens Center. It's interesting that it never plateaued, and one of the things that I did through my whole career is I gave out 50 business cards a day. So I'd put 50 in my pocket, and I wouldn't go home at night until I got them all given away. I mean, networking is the key to my success. There isn't anybody almost that I haven't met somewhere. I know where every lawn is in town, where every real estate deal, and it's so, give your card out, and you got to have a product, and the key to success is find a need and fill it. And everybody in here has a need, and everybody has a key to that success, because if you find a need and fill it, somebody will buy it. Somebody needs it. But then, and it's not what you know, it's who you know. And you get to know those people by networking. But then you damn well better know something when you get there. Don't be a con artist. Don't lie. Don't steal. Don't cheat. And don't tolerate anybody around you that does. Be honest. Tell the truth. Give them a good service and product. You'll be a millionaire automatic in life. Every time. It's not hard to do. Just tell the truth and do a good job.
So what was the process that you went through to write a book? Who came to you and said, hey, John, we need to put this in a book?
Well,
and how'd that process go?
My story, as you heard it, is a rags to riches story, and many people said, you ought to write a book. And it was said to me so many times, but I kept a diary from the time I was 5 years old. And I still have all these little diaries, the 1-year diary, 5-year diaries, and I've kept them all. And then, about 2000, I start putting them together. In 2005-ish, I hired a ghostwriter in Jackson, Mississippi. and he did Elvis Presley's 3 books of his life. His name was James Patterson. And I spent a month in Jackson, Mississippi, telling him my story, and he would tape it, and and then we had an editor, and it was a lot of work. But I told I read all of my diaries, and he read them all, actually. I let him read them all, and Trenton, you weren't in my diary. But he took them all and put it together. James Dickerson, I don't know why I say James Patterson. James Dickerson was his name. He did Elvis Presley's books. He did 50 movie stars. I was lucky to meet him through a friend named Kathleen Sullivan, who Mel Strong was his daughter. She helped me with my book. It took 3 years to write it, and and it was painful because I had to go over a lot of detail of what happened in my childhood and my life. But it was well worth it. I never made any money at it. Never intended to make any money at it. I gave all the money to charity. I've given $8 million to charity in my lifetime so far, and I love giving. And Tom Osborne, everybody says, I want you to know that the best saying that he's ever taught me is, I've never seen a hearse pull a U-Haul yet. No one has ever taken it with them. So that, remember that. Stuff is stuff, money's money. It's the journey, and it's enjoying it.
Sorry.
When did I find God? I was born a Catholic. I did 23andMe, and I'll get that in a minute, but I found out I'm 10% Jewish. But so God is everywhere. God is God. He's made our life. Yeah, I believe that God created the earth. Please, and I accepted Christ as a Christian at 14 years old, right in the middle of my mom having all the nervous breakdowns. And I don't care what religion you are, and I don't care who your higher power is, but by God, have one. Have a higher power. If you think that you're God, then you're in trouble. So have a higher power. Mine I chose and raised is we're all raised with our family. Most of us believe in what we're raised, and I believe that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and I'll profess it. But I also don't disbelieve in anybody else's belief, because as long as they have a higher power that keeps them going and never give up. Suicide is fatal, so you don't want to kill yourself, and that doesn't fix nothing, right? So never give up. But God kept me the faith in God, and having someone when I wasn't with some human was helpful to not give up. Sorry.
Oh, thanks. That's a great question. So my question was about like mentoring and kind of lifelong education. You mentioned a seminar you've been to. What's your take on kind of investing in ourselves so that we can continually learn and grow and take the mistakes that we've had and have someone guide us through it? I know a lot, like right now, like people are willing to sell you all kinds of things. So what's your take on that?
Say it.
Like going to seminars, continuing education, getting mentors. Okay. Yeah.
So being here tonight is you're doing it. I mean, I'll never forget, I had a foster dad, one of them, and he was fixing his car as 10 years old, and why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? What's that for? And he says, isn't your mom calling you? Because I asked so many questions. But that was my best strength. I mean, every day's a seminar. And wherever you are, somebody's doing something. And if you don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it, ask. And that day you're learning. I went to Tony Robbins. I don't know if anybody's done it. 8 days down in Palm Beach, 14 hours a day, 45 degrees. They kept the room so you don't fall asleep. But, it was powerful. I learned a lot. But I learned a lot about me. They take you back from your childhood, and that was painful again, But every day that you can, any seminar you can go, anything you can learn, but learn, the negatives and the positives. When I met a rich man or a woman, throughout my whole life, I never said, how'd you make your money?
I said, what'd you do wrong? I wanted to learn what mistakes they made. And so that I could learn from those mistakes, and it kind of goes back to money buys experience. Experience winds up with the money. If I can avoid making that mistake and having to pay for it, however, then I could make a profit with avoiding that problem and avoiding that mistake. And so that that was one of my biggest things is, what did you do wrong? And I'd write it down, and I'd never forget it. And then I would constantly look at today's life. Is, you know, when you talk about seminars and things, is we have a whole new world, because it's kind of like these houses you're buying today, and they're called flips or wholesaling. You buy them and sell them to somebody else without ever owning them. I don't know why I didn't know about that shit when I was growing up. I always had to buy it, didn't I, Trenton? You know, but these guys buy them and sell them, and they don't even own them. So they're smarter than we ever were. But bottom line is, what are they doing? They're tearing down something old and rebuilding it. And the world today, because there's been everything invented that you can imagine, right? So what are you doing today? The disrupt word is the most incredible word in the world. So you're disrupting what people have done for centuries, you know, like the cab to Uber, right? And so then you're all of a sudden now coming up with ideas of somebody else's idea, but making it better. Paradigm shift, have you heard that word? Thinking out of the box and doing it better and effective than they were doing it. And that's really the key to success today, is disrupting anything you can figure out how to make it better, cheaper, and better quality, and better service, better product, and simplify. Today's world is unfortunately become more lazy, or I don't like to use that word, but simplify. You know, with Amazon, everything's shipped. I mean, everything's different. There is no more milkmans that deliver the milk. And, you know, I got a deal from Walgreens the other day. It says, we'll ship it right to your house. And I mean, I was like, when's that? I was always wondering, when's that going to happen? So, you know, grocery stores. I'm the one that invented going down the aisle on the internet and having your food delivered to you. And then all of a sudden they start doing it, and they stole my idea. But I mean, ask a million questions. And my mom only taught me a couple things because she died so young, but one of them was, if you never ask, you'll never know. And so every day is a seminar wherever you are. Ask questions and learn and do it. Implement it. Don't talk about it. Just make it happen. Thank you.
Appreciate your time tonight. On that deal with the office or the Offit deal that you got, you said there's others players that were in it, large players. How did you guys get that deal? Was it something creative you came up with, or did you just outbid everybody?
And I stole the idea. I disrupt. I literally went to every seminar when we were talking about why they should pick us than anybody else. And all the companies ended up, the other ones ended up with, there was 168 of them that were let, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard. And ours is Air Force that we won. But I stole the idea from the Chamber of Commerce in Omaha, because they always had a big slogan called Buy the Big O. So I went in with our proposal, which was a 5-year-long proposal. It started in 2000, and 2005 is when we won it. Because it's a 50-year deal, and it was new, and they had to make sure they dotted every I and cross every T, right? And constantly in our proposal, I said, buy the big O. But I said, buy local. Use the local team, which was us. Because we're going to stay here, and we're going to live here, and we're going to be able to face those future soldiers that are protecting our country for 50 years. We're never going to be gone. Where those others came in from Texas and they built it and then moved back to Texas. And so we also said we'll use every contractor local, which we did. So that we didn't bring any material, we tried to buy all the local material, local contractors, so everything was under warranty in my mind for 50 years. And they bought it, and we're still there doing that. So And it wasn't based on price. It was based on what your plan of action was. And that's kind of like life. Just like you asked, seminars, what is your plan? How are you going to implement your plan? Stay to the plan, never give up, tell the truth, and stay in your own lane. And you don't need to be greedy. Remember, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. It's okay to just do what you do best, do it well, and put money away for a rainy day, because that's real important. Anybody else? I think they want to use your money to go drink. Thanks for having me.
Man, how about John Hoich? Didn't disappoint, did he, guys? I had Brad come up to me a minute ago. He bought a couple of your books, and he works with Colin Schwartz. And he goes, "Hey, Colin says he's one of the top 3 most influential people in the city." And so yeah, got a handful of books here. What was that?